My name is Evelyn Vance and I am 83 years old. My life has not been measured in years, but in seasons of patience. I am a botanist, a guardian. My home is a quiet, secluded arboretum, and at its heart lies my life's work, my late husband Arthur's legacy. It is not a house or a fortune. It is a vault, a climate-controlled seed preservation vault, containing over 10,000 unique, heirloom plant species, plants that have vanished from the rest of the world. Arthur was a visionary, a man who saw the fragility of our planet's biodiversity. He called the vault the Arkansas. It was his promise to the future, a library of life itself. Since he passed, I have been its sole keeper, its quiet, steadfast librarian. I thought my final chapter would be a peaceful one, a slow fade into the earth I so loved. I never imagined the wolves would come, not for the seeds, but for the sacred ground they were buried in. They came on a Tuesday, my grandson David and a woman named Chloe. David, my only daughter's child, had his father's charming smile and a hollowness in his eyes that was all his own. He was the CEO of Elysian Fields Agri-Tech, a billion-dollar corporation that dealt in the world of genetically modified supercrops. Chloe, his lead scientist, had a mind like a diamond, brilliant, beautiful, and hard enough to cut glass. They sat in my rustic study, their sharp, modern clothes an affront to the gentle, organic chaos of my life's work. "Grandmother," David began, his voice a smooth practice tool, "we have an opportunity to truly bring your work, Arthur's work, into the 21st century." Chloe unrolled a massive digital blueprint across my old oak desk. "This entire valley," she said, her finger tracing a circle around my arboretum, "is the perfect, isolated environment for the field testing of our new flagship product, Solaria, a new species of corn, genetically engineered to be drought-resistant, pest-resistant, and yield 3 times the normal crop. It will feed millions, grandmother. And to do this," David added gently, "we need to acquire the land. Your seed museum is a beautiful sentiment, but it's standing in the way of progress. We will build you a new, smaller, state-of-the-art facility on the edge of the property. We have prepared an offer that is extraordinarily generous." They wanted to bulldoze my husband's living library of biodiversity, to plant a single sterile genetically uniform crop. They wanted to replace a symphony of life with a monoculture of profit. "The Ark is not a museum," I said, my voice quiet, "but with the strength of ancient redwoods. It is a promise to the future. This land is not for sale. It is not a commodity. It is a sanctuary." David's smile faltered for a second. "That's a very noble sentiment, grandmother. But the board is committed. This is happening. We were hoping you'd see the benefits." They thought my principles were a negotiating tactic. They did not understand that for me, some things were not negotiable. They had just declared war on a woman who had spent her life studying the patient, silent, and often brutal strategies of nature itself. Their siege was a slow, creeping blight. When I refused their offer, they began their legal assault. They petitioned the county, claiming my underutilized private land was a violation of local zoning ordinances that required agricultural land to be productive. They, of course, defined productivity in terms of profit per acre, a language my ARC did not speak. They launched a public relations campaign. Julian's company painted me as an eccentric recluse, a seed hoarder, who was selfishly preventing the development of a crop that could end world hunger. They sponsored articles in scientific journals, written by Chloe, that dismissed my husband's work in heirloom preservation as a romantic but ultimately futile hobby. They were not just trying to take my land, they were trying to rewrite my husband's legacy, to paint him as a fool and me as a madwoman. The pressure from the town, a town that had once revered my husband, was immense. Elysian Fields promised jobs, a new research facility, a massive injection of cash into the local economy. I became the enemy, the old woman in the woods standing in the way of everyone's prosperous future. The final betrayal came from the inside. They bribed my young research assistant, a boy I had mentored, to give them access to my private research notes, my hybridization schedules. They were looking for a weakness, a chink in my armor. Their lawyers, armed with my own confidential data, filed a new injunction. They claimed that my unscientific cross-pollination methods posed a genetic risk to the surrounding farms, a risk of creating invasive, super weeds. It was a lie, a grotesque twisting of my life's work. But it was a lie dressed in the language of science, and it was terrifyingly effective. A judge, swayed by their expert testimony and the promise of economic boom, granted them a partial victory. He didn't give them the whole property, but he gave them a court order granting them temporary research access to a 50-acre plot at the northern edge of my land, the plot where I grew my experimental corn varietals. They were to use it for containment studies. I knew it was not a study, it was an invasion. The day their trucks rolled in, a part of me died. They erected high-tech fences, installed their own irrigation systems, and began to prepare the soil. I was a prisoner in my own sanctuary, forced to watch as they prepared to plant their sterile, monolithic crop on the very land my husband had consecrated to biodiversity. I was beaten. I was isolated. My reputation was in tatters. I sat in Arthur's old greenhouse, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and growing things, and I wept. How could I fight a billion-dollar corporation that had the law, the public, and science itself as its weapons? My hand rested on an old, leather-bound book on his potting bench. It wasn't a research journal. It was his private atlas, a beautiful hand-drawn book in which he had catalogued every single seed in our vault. I opened it, my tears blurring the beautiful, precise illustrations. Tucked into the back cover was a sealed, waxed paper envelope. An envelope I had never seen before. "My dearest Evelyn," the letter inside began, his familiar, strong script, a voice from the grave. "If you are reading this, it means the locusts have come. Do not despair. A farmer knows that for every predator, nature has created a parasite. I have planted one for you." The letter was a confession and a master plan. Years ago, Arthur had been working on a commission for a rival agricultural firm. They wanted him to create a terminator gene, a genetic switch that would make a plant seed sterile, forcing farmers to buy new seeds every year. He found the idea morally repugnant, but it gave him an idea of his own. He had created his own version, a Trojan Horse gene, and he had hidden it deep within the genome of one of his most beautiful and robust corn varietals. This corn, which he called the cerulean strain, was indistinguishable from his other legacy corn. It grew tall and strong. Its yield was excellent, but it carried a secret, a hidden recessive gene, linked to a specific protein that would only be expressed in the plant's final stage of maturation. This gene did not affect the corn itself. It did not affect its taste or its nutritional value. But when the plant reached its full height, when it was ready for harvest, this gene would trigger a massive systemic production of a harmless, but visually spectacular anthocyanin pigment. "The entire plant," he wrote, "the stalk, the leaves, the husks, even the silk, will turn a brilliant, undeniable, and completely unnatural shade of blue. It is a cosmetic flaw, nothing more. But for a company like Elysian Fields, a company whose entire brand is built on the promise of genetic purity and predictable perfection, a field of blue corn is not just an anomaly. It is a public declaration of failure. It is a catastrophe. It is proof that they are not in control of the very genetics they claim to have mastered." The letter ended with a chillingly simple instruction. "They will eventually take a piece of our land, my love. It is in their nature. When they do, give them a gift. The world thinks the Ark is my greatest legacy. They are wrong. This is a seed of chaos planted in a field of arrogance." A cold, beautiful, and terrible fire ignited in my soul. I was not a victim. I was the keeper of a secret harvest. Played my part. I became the defeated old woman. I went to David. I told him I could not fight anymore. I offered him a truce. "You have your 50 acres, I said, my voice trembling with feigned weakness. "But grant me one final sentimental wish. Let the first crop you plant be a tribute to your grandfather. A symbolic gesture. Use one of his legacy seeds. A single strain to honor his memory, before you move on to your own." I showed him the seed catalog. I pointed to the cerulean strain. "This one," I said. It was his favorite. He called it skytop corn. David and Chloe exchanged a look. I could see the cold calculation in their eyes. A single harmless concession to a senile old woman. Perfect PR opportunity. "A wonderful idea, grandmother," David said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "A beautiful way to honor his memory." They took the bait. They took the seeds. 4 months, I watched from my cabin as the 50-acre plot was transformed. I watched as the first green shoots of the cerulean strain pushed through the dark earth. It grew tall and strong, a perfect, uniform sea of green. Elysian Fields was ecstatic. They began to plan their launch event, a massive press conference and investor showcase, to be held right there, in front of the flawless first harvest of their new Solaria crop, a crop they were, of course, taking full credit for. They invited the world's agricultural press, financial analysts, even the Secretary of Agriculture. It was to be their moment of ultimate triumph. The day of the event was a perfect, late summer afternoon. Helicopters buzzed overhead, ferrying in the VIPs. A large, elegant stage was set up at the edge of the cornfield. David and Chloe stood on that stage, the picture of modern agricultural genius. Today, David began, his voice booming across the field, we are not just showcasing a new crop. We are showcasing a new future for agriculture. A future of abundance, of sustainability, of perfection. Behold, Solaria. He gestured with a grand sweep of his arm to the magnificent, endless field of perfect, green corn behind him. That was the moment Arthur's ghost chose to arrive. It started subtly. A single stalk near the front began to show a faint bluish tinge at the tips of its leaves. Then another. And another. A quiet, insidious blush of color, spreading through the field like a virus. A reporter in the front row pointed his camera. A confused murmur went through the crowd. On stage, Chloe was staring at the field, her scientific mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. David, following her gaze, went pale. The change accelerated. The pale blush deepened, from sky blue to a rich, vibrant, and completely unnatural cobalt. A wave of impossible color rolled through the sea of green. Within 5 minutes, the entire 50-acre field, the entire perfect harvest, had turned a brilliant, shocking, and undeniable blue. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the whirring of 100 cameras, capturing the spectacular, surreal catastrophe. That was my cue. I had an ally, a disgraced agricultural journalist whom David's company had ruined years ago. He was live-streaming the event to a network of independent media. At my signal, his drone, which had been hovering high above, swooped down, providing a breathtaking panoramic shot of the impossible blue field. Then he patched my voice into the live stream. My name is Evelyn Vance. My voice echoed, clear and strong, not from the stage, but from the speakers of every phone and camera in the audience. And what you are seeing is not a failure of nature. It is a failure of character. I told them everything. I told them about my husband's work, about their theft, about their lies. And I told them about the cerulean strain. They came here to create a supercrop, my voice concluded. But they were so arrogant, so blinded by profit, that they couldn't even tell the difference between a true legacy and a Trojan horse. They wanted to prove that nature could be perfected, that it could be controlled. Instead, my husband has proven from beyond the grave that nature always has the last laugh. They did not build the future. They have just sown the seeds of their own ruin. The humiliation was total, a viral global spectacle. The blue corn catastrophe destroyed Elysian Fields' Agri-Tech. Their stock became worthless overnight. Their investors sued them into oblivion. They were not just corporate failures, they were a global laughingstock. I did not watch them fall. I went back to my Arkansas. The court, in the wake of the scandal, reversed its decision and granted my land permanent, protected sanctuary status. My life is quiet again. The arboretum is safe. The silence is no longer one of grief, but of profound, deep peace. I walk through my husband's greenhouse, my fingers brushing against the leaves of 1,000 different plants. He was a botanist. He knew that some seeds are meant to be preserved, to be guarded for the future. But he also knew that some seeds are meant to be planted as weapons. To anyone listening, they may tell you that your knowledge is old, that your passion is a hobby, that your legacy is in the way of progress. But do not forget that in the smallest, most overlooked seed can lie the power to turn an entire field blue. Your wisdom is not a relic. It is a seed. And all you have to do is wait for the right arrogant hands to plant it for you. My name is Evelyn Vance. And my garden is finally at peace.